Good day everyone, I am Raimi Bikinsaga and welcome to my video demonstration. So first, we will talk about what is metacognition is, and second, we will talk about the components of metacognition, and we will also go through the metacognitive regulation controls, like how we plan, monitor, or evaluate. And lastly, I also share some ideas about the metacognitive teaching strategies, and it is very useful as a student or as a future educators because we can be more mindful and independent as a learner. The first topic is, what is metacognition? So when we say metacognition, it is about thinking about your thinking. It is being aware of how you understand, how you learn, or how you study. Ito sa imuhang mga style when you do a study. And for example, if I'm going to study, and I always ask myself is, do I understand this? Sakto ba ako mga strategy na akong gibuhat? And that is already an example of metacognition. It helps us know when we need to reread, ask for help, and change our way of learning. So next is we go to the components of metacognition. So there are three types of components of metacognition. So first is we have the declarative knowledge or personal knowledge. So when you say personal knowledge, it is about ourselves. It is about knowing yourself as a learner. You know your strengths, your weaknesses, and kung unsay mga strategy na mas effective diha para sa inyo. Personal knowledge, it help us na if kabalo ka kung unsay mas effective para sa inyo is mas efficient ang imong learning. You can avoid wasting your time and the methods that don't work for you. And that is a personal knowledge. So second is we have a procedural knowledge or task knowledge. This is about how to do something, or like you have to do a process or mga steps para sa imong ginabuhat nga task or performance. So last is we have a conditional knowledge or strategy knowledge. This is about knowing when and why to use a certain learning strategy. Flexible ka sa imong approach depending on the situation. So one of the example of conditional knowledge is na ay student nga after a long hours of learning or studying is she decide to use a flashcards instead of reading her notes para di siya makafeel bored. And that is an example of strategy knowledge. It helps us using the right strategy at the right time. So now we're done with the components of metacognition, and now let's proceed to metacognitive regulation and control. So there are three types: the planning, monitoring, and evaluating. So first we have a planning. So when we say planning, this is when you prepare and set goals before starting a learning task. You think ahead about what you need, what strategy to use, and how will you approach the task. So for example sa planning is, if I have an exam next week, then nag-plan ko about sa akong study schedule, like kaning adlaw is mag-review ko sa akong notes, mag-watch ko sa akong mga videos na connect sa among topics, then mag-practice test ko, then I study in a quiet place na maka-avoid sa mga distractions. That is one of the example of planning. So next is we have in monitoring. So when we say monitoring, it is about when you check your own understanding when you are studying or doing a task. You ask yourself, I am understanding this, or do I need to slow down or to reread? I am staying focused. So lastly is we have evaluating. This happens after the lesson is already done, and then you reflect yourself and ask yourself, did I learn what I needed, and then what should I improve next time? I'm done discussing about the metacognitive regulations and control. Now let's move to the last topic, which is the metacognitive teaching strategies. So these are the 5 strategies. first is think aloud. So when we say think aloud, we say our thoughts, and the students already know how to handle their confusions and check themselves instead of giving up. And when we say journalizing, it is about the students only write their thoughts, their feelings, their reflection about the lessons or their task. So the third is error analysis. So when we say error analysis, this is where the student review their mistakes instead of ignoring them. And for example is when you get a low score of your quiz, and then instead of ignoring, nakapangutana ka sa imong kagalingon nga next time unsa man ako ang buhaton. So the fourth is wrapper. So when we say wrapper, it helps student to reflect before and after the lessons. For example, before the lessons, the student asks herself nga, what do I already know about this? Then after the lessons, maka-ask ang student sa iyang self nga, what did I learn? Lisod ba to ang about sa topic? So the last topic is peer monitoring. So this is when the student help each other by discussing or explaining ideas or sharing information. One of the example of this is kanang mag-group study mo or sa imong mga amiga, then mag-sharing mo og ideas. So that's the end of our journal lessons for today's video.